You will come to work today, or I will have you fired, the manager screamed at Lisie over the phone. Sam, I have a fever, Lisie coughed. I can't even stand up properly. How am I going to come and work with a fever? She coughed again. Please understand, Sam, I have only taken a few days off since joining a year ago. The restaurant manager interrupted her. Hey, I don't care how many leaves you took. We are fully booked tonight, and you will be here. That's it, he told her condescendingly. Lisie was getting angrier and angrier at the arrogant man. Why don't you ask Greg to come? He is coming anyway. He is the head chef. I won't be needed if at least one chef is there. I know because I have done so many shifts alone by myself, as the only chef, she told him in between coughs. He cannot come. He is not available today, the manager replied in short. He did not tell any of us that he will not be able to make it today. Did he tell you yesterday? Lisie asked him, getting angrier by the minute, still coughing. The manager stammered. He told me today, and he had a fair reason for not coming. Well, that's too bad. You will have to find a new chef for the day then. The manager lost it completely. You fricking bitch. You will come to work today, or I'll have you fired, stupido. Then he hung up. Lisie had worked for Macy's restaurant for a year as a chef. It was her first job as a chef. The Macy's was not her first choice of a place to work, but she had to start somewhere. At the time, Macy's was just a mediocre restaurant. Most of the time, she was the one who stepped up when the head chef, Greg, was absent, which has happened a lot since she joined as a chef. Greg figured out that Lisie was a competent chef and decided to take advantage of her. He would take credit for her work while taking more time away from work. He could do this perfectly since the restaurant manager and he were best buddies. This was one of those days Greg failed to show up to work, but unfortunately, Lisie was not well that day. She called the manager and told him she would not be able to come since she had a fever. The manager said she had to go since Greg would not be there. She asked if he could tell Greg to go since there was no way she could come to work with a fever and cough. The manager cursed at her and said it was fully booked for the evening and she would be fired if she did not come to work. Lisie was taken aback by the degrading way he spoke at her. It was disrespectful. Before she said another word, he hung up. Lisie was angry at him for the way he talked. She was also very hurt because it was primarily because of her hard work that they were fully booked. When Lisie first joined, it was just an average place with only a few older adults booking for dinner. After she came, she introduced several new plates that became very popular quickly. Greg envied her success, but since he was the head chef, he took most of the credit for the restaurant's turnaround. Greg and his buddy, the restaurant manager, ensured that the upper management did not find anything special about her skills. But all the restaurant staff knew it was entirely because of Lisie's skills as a chef that the restaurant finally started to thrive. Younger people who joined the team recently took her as an example of how to work in a restaurant. Lisie turned off her phone, deeply hurt by the manager's words. She turned her phone off and decided to take a good rest regardless of what happened to her job. She was barely able to go down to get a taxi. She somehow made it to her doctor, and upon examining her, the doctor gave her some medicine and advised her to stay at home for at least a couple of days until she fully recovered. After buying the prescribed drugs from the pharmacy, she took a taxi to her apartment and crawled back to bed. She was coughing, which made it very hard for her to fall asleep. The next day, she was a little better. The manager called her again but did not answer him, and instead sent him a message telling him she wouldn't be coming that day either. The manager called several times but did not answer because she did not want to put up with his childish tantrums. She was hurt by how he had talked to her the previous day. It took 2 days for her to get well enough to return to work. During her time at home, she thought of even quitting the job. But since she did nothing wrong, she decided to see what would happen if she returned to work. When she reported to work, she was stopped at the door by the manager. He told her that she was under review due to her absence. She was stunned to hear it. Although he said it, she did not think he would go that far. She knew the manager did not like her because she was talented and a woman. She was angry at how unjustly he was treating her. She told him the same. The manager then screamed at her loudly, degrading her in front of all the staff. Lizzy felt helpless, and tears started to roll down her eyes. The manager enjoyed seeing her cry. He berated her even more. She could see Greg also enjoying her pain at the kitchen door. The manager and the head chef were best buddies. So maybe they were planning to send her home for good. She went back to the changing room. A couple of servers said that Greg and the manager were total jackasses and not to take what he said seriously. They liked Lizzy, but they were unable to do anything. Then, after the waitress left, Elsa, a waitress who joined at the same restaurant time as Lizzy did, came to Lizzy. She asked Lizzy not to worry and that everything would be fine. Lizzy was surprised that usually silent Elsa talked to her and seemed very sure of what she said. She felt good a little because Elsa was a good person, although she did not speak with people much. If she believed it enough to tell it, Lizzy, that might be true. After about 10 minutes, she was called to the review, and Greg was there also. Lizzy's good hopes were short-lived as they started to accuse her of sabotaging the restaurant by being absent on a critical day. They said everything was better before Lizzy joined the restaurant, which was unbelievable since Macy's was on a downward slope then. They did not listen to anything Lizzy said. They did not let her even complete her sentences. They criticized her for half an hour before finally telling her she was allowed to go. She started to go back home, sobbing. The rest of the staff watched helplessly. As she was trying to leave, another person came in. Everyone was surprised to see that it was the owner of the restaurant. The owner had not come to the restaurant more than a couple of times in the past 6 months. He was busy setting up a new branch of Macy's in another state. The owner saw Lizzy leaving with a tear-soaked face. He asked Lizzy to stop. Then he started to talk. He said that he had been looking at the past few days' events. There were a lot of customer complaints over those past few days. Sam, the manager, started blaming Lizzy, telling them that she took leave without notifying her and more lies. The owner took out his phone and showed them a photo of the manager and Greg having a beer at the beach. The manager's and Greg's faces were completely white. The owner told them how the manager and Greg took advantage of the complex working nature of Lizzy and the junior manager, giving them full responsibility while they took a lot of paid time off. The owner had been looking to the issues in the restaurant even before Lizzy came, but got to know that it was Lizzy's talents that brought back the customers. Then the owner apologized to Lizzy for all the abuse she had to go through. He said he knew that Macy was getting successful because of her skills as a great cook. He also mentioned that apart from the manager and the head chef, the rest of the staff was doing an excellent job. When he said this, Sam's and Greg's face darkened. They started to talk and tried to argue with the owner. Without saying a single word, the owner raised his hand and motioned them to stop. After several feeble attempts to make him hear them, they stopped, defeated, without even a word. Then, in front of everyone, the restaurant owner fired the manager and Greg. At the same time, he promoted Lizzy to the head chef and the young junior manager to the manager post. All the staff cheered for both of them since they knew they were more than capable of the job. The fired manager and Greg got up and left, their heads lowered. Lizzy was delighted and incredibly proud that her hard work had finally paid off. She thanked the restaurant owner for supporting them and promised they would make Macy's the best restaurant in the state. The owner said that he believed it and that they had his full support. The staff congratulated the newly promoted duo with sincere joy. That day, the restaurant's customers felt the change in the restaurant. Everyone was doing their job happily. Lisie cooked the best food she put out with the support team. Within a couple of months, Macy started to draw so many customers that they had to maintain a long waiting list for customers who booked weeks ahead for their dinner. Soon, Lisie hired another talented chef to support her. Between them, they devised unique dishes daily that got top customer compliments. As promised, Lisie and the new manager made the restaurant one of the best in the area. They even had to expand to the next block because they did not have enough room to cater to all the customers. The owner had made the right decision by allowing the two young people. Lisie did not stop at Macy's. She later started her restaurant in another city by her name. Lisie soon began to thrive under her well-experienced guidance. As a postscript, there's something to add. One day, while interviewing chefs at her restaurant, guess who came to interview? It was none other than Lisie's old mate, Greg. He walked into the room, and when he recognized her, his face went white like he had seen a ghost. He said nothing to her, simply stood up and left. Lisie was as surprised to see him as he did after seeing her. Later, Lisie joked that she might have given him a chance if he had owned up to his mistakes and just talked to her. She had never forgotten, but she was always willing to forgive.
Alice and Jack met at a nightclub. Alice went there with friends to celebrate her 18th birthday. It was her first outing into the night social life, so to speak. Before that, her parents did not allow her to visit such places, so it was a whole event for her. It was at the club that she met Jack, who was 10 years older than her. He was already an accomplished guy. He had a great job as a history teacher at the university. In addition, he was also engaged in tutoring. He had no complaints from his students, so he earned very well. Jack immediately liked a young girl who was very beautiful. He came to the club for his friend's birthday. Since he was driving, he did not drink alcohol, but he watched others with interest. He invited Alice to a slow dance, then another, and another. And at the end of the evening, the girl fell in love with her older admirer. She gave him her phone number and then waited patiently for his call for several days. They started dating, and 2 months later, Jack proposed to her. Alice's parents were against such a quick wedding. They hoped that she would graduate from university, but Alice stood her ground. They gave their blessing, taking into account that the girl promised not to drop out of school. Alice was happy. After the wedding, she moved in with her husband, who had a wonderful apartment in the downtown area of the city. She did not drop out of university and kept her promise because she graduated. She and her husband had a great relationship. Alice was just a young girl when she married him, and with him she blossomed and matured. 5 years passed, and Alice began to notice that sometimes her husband began to behave strangely. Sometimes he would come home a little tired and thoughtful, and sometimes, especially when he was late, he was in a great mood. He joked, hugged his wife, told her about his love for her. Sometimes he did not come home empty-handed. He would bring her a bouquet of flowers, then some kind of surprise, like buying a cake. His cheerful mood pleased Alice at first, but then she began to suspect something. "Well, I don't know. Let's follow him or something," said her friend Kate when Alice told her about her suspicions. "Come on, what are you saying? I don't suspect him. I'm just like that. I feel a little uneasy, Katie. I don't know why, but I'm worried. It's like something bad is waiting for me around the corner, and I won't know anything until I stumble upon it," Alice said thoughtfully. Kate took her by the hand and looked straight into her eyes. Said, "Alice, you know that you have very good intuition." "That's what scares me," Alice replied. Kate squeezed her hand. "Then do your best to find out the truth, no matter how bitter or sweet it is. You don't have to sit flat on your butt, honey, and then you'll regret that you missed your happiness. Better act," and Alice decided to act. With the help of her devoted friend Katie, she found a private detective who was ready to follow her husband. For a tidy sum, a man watched Jack for 2 weeks, and in the next meeting, he laid out the results of his observations in front of Alice. And she was shocked before the truth was revealed. Jack had a mistress, a very beautiful girl with a charming voice and a gorgeous figure. Jack saw her 3 or 4 times a week. They would go to a restaurant located in the VIP zone, and several times they came to the hotel, rented a room. They were there for several hours. The most shocking thing for Alice was that the girl was very young, just like she was when she met Jack. The mistress was only 18 years old and had just graduated from high school. Alice silently digested all the information. She was ready to cry, but right up to the moment when the detective told her, "The information, as I understand it, is very important to you, and I have done something else for which you will have to pay extra. In addition to these pictures on the street, I also took a series of pictures of a different nature. Of course, additional expenses were required here to ensure the confidentiality of access to the hotel room. You will have to reimburse me for monetary damages, but I thought it would be important for you. It seems I was not mistaken." Of course he was not mistaken. Alice was willing to pay any money for such evidence. Seeing Alice's enthusiasm, the detective asked for twice the amount he was going to announce, and Alice did not even raise an eyebrow. She didn't have that kind of money with her, but she transferred that amount. She knew that her husband would have questions about where she spent such an impressive amount, but she would come up with something. She would say that she had paid a fee for an expensive fur coat. This would convince Jack. As soon as the money was transferred to the detective, he handed her a hefty envelope and a flash drive with a satisfied face. All of the information, both photos and videos, is on a flash drive. But, for convenience, I also printed everything in paper form. I hope you were satisfied with my work. If you ever need my help, then I am ready to do anything for you. You see, everything, not just a detective investigation. Hints that the detective could perform not only legitimate operations caused Alice a feeling of disgust, but she was even more disgusted by the pictures of Jack's meetings with his mistress, whose name was Emerald. Even her name was beautiful, and the photos showed the smallest details. Yes, she should have shown more gratitude to the detective. He spared no expense on the equipment. The faces were clear, and the photos were from different angles. Half of the pictures were taken near, half from far away. Alice felt sick. That bastard! He seemed such a wonderful husband, but in fact, the most ordinary womanizer. And the girl! Still milk on the lips is not dry and already tumbling with other people's husbands. That snake! Kate was indignant when a friend showed her the pictures. Alice didn't say anything. She herself was in love with Jack at the age of 18. It's no wonder that this girl also got caught in his web. She cried over these photos the whole day before. Jack asked her in the evening why her eyes were so red, and Alice simply replied that she had a headache. But now the girl had no tears. She realized that Jack had trampled on her love, and she longed for revenge, but only such revenge as to destroy Jack. She needed to come up with something that would ruin his life, and then she would leave him. Thank God she had a diploma in her hands, so she will be able to get a job and support herself. It's good that her parents forced her to study. No, look at that. And he also does tutoring. Yes, he should be kept away from decent society, Kate persisted, swearing more and more. And then Alice had an idea. Jack is tutoring, teaches at the university, and he values his reputation very much. He is quite calm about any mistakes of other people, but he carefully monitors himself. It's strange that he walks with his mistress in front of everyone, although maybe he tells everyone that this is his niece, she thought. Alice realized that a ruined reputation would be the best punishment for her husband, and she began to implement her idea. To do this, she called a detective. If he's not just doing surveillance, then he could help her. He was just the right kind of person. Unprincipled, cunning, resourceful, and she needs him. She called him. He recognized her immediately. Or maybe he wrote down the number of a generous client. Most likely it was because when he picked up the phone, his voice was very sweet and friendly. "I need your help. No, there is no need to follow anymore. No, The photos are no longer needed. I need a different kind of help. I'll tell you." And Alice told him what she needed to be done. At the end, she announced the amount she was willing to pay for this service. When she finished speaking, she heard the detective's insinuating voice. "A very generous reward. For that kind of money, I'll do anything you say. I am completely at your disposal. I need something else from you. If you get me the list of his students, it will speed up my work a lot." A cold smile appeared on Alice's face. "I will do it. You will receive the lists tomorrow." 3 days passed. Jack was humming a tune when he was driving to university. Today, he had another date with Emerald, and he figured out how to have fun today. He wanted to quickly share his idea with his young girlfriend. He had been anticipating the most pleasant evening. When he entered the auditorium, he was struck by the deep silence, surprised by the unusual behavior of the students. He began the lecture. But after 10 minutes, he realized that something unusual was happening. He began to look at the students, but most of the students were sitting with their eyes downcast. Some looked at Jack with some kind of contempt or disgust, and only a few people looked directly into his eyes. Jack got angry. "What's the matter? Is there something written on my forehead, dear? I don't understand the reason for this behavior." Everyone was silent. Then Jack turned to one of the students who was staring at him intently. "Andrew, what's the matter with you all today? What happened?" After a few seconds, the guy looked from Jack to the blackboard behind the teacher. "We're all right, Mr. Jack. Look at the board." It seemed to Jack that an eternity had passed when he finally managed to figure out who was in the photos posted on the board. When he realized that he and Emerald were in the pictures, he shuddered. How is this possible? Who did this? Why did they do it? And where did these pictures come from? He turned to the students and asked in an ominous whisper, "Who did this? Admit who did it. Otherwise, I will not allow the whole group to take the exam." Andrew replied, "Mr. Jack, honestly, it's not us. We went into the auditorium, and then these pictures were already hanging. It's not us." Jack turned back to the photographs. His face was flushed with embarrassment and fear. Emerald's parents are not aware of their relationship. No one should have known about their relationship. And if Alice finds out, it's going to be a nightmare. He didn't want to lose his wife. Jack quickly went to the board and began to tear off the pictures. A minute later, the board was empty. Jack breathed a sigh of relief, but as it turned out, he was overjoyed early. Just as he wanted to address the students to ask them not to spread about this incident, the door to the auditorium opened. "Professor Jack, you are being summoned to the dean's office." An hour later, Jack was on his way home. An unpleasant conversation with the dean, who received an envelope of pictures of Jack and Alina, disrupted lectures, a request to write on his own, too many events in 1 hour. Jack wanted to get home faster. He has already figured out what he will say to his wife. After all, this information could also reach her. As soon as he entered the apartment, he called Alice. "Darling, are you home? What happened is terrible. I'm going to tell you this now. Imagine, I was fired. This is all Hammerson's machinations, I'm sure. He's always scheming against me, so he took these photos to defile my reputation." And then Jack saw 3 suitcases standing in the hallway. He looked at them in bewilderment and then went into the kitchen. Alice was sitting at the table drinking coffee. She was calm and did not even change her face when she saw her husband. Jack looked at his wife in confusion. "And what are these suitcases, dear? Are you leaving somewhere?" Alice put her cup on the table, folded her hands in front of her, and replied, "Yes, I'm leaving." "Far away? For how long? And why didn't I know about it?" Jack continued to ask. "For a long time, for a very long time." Jack turned pale. Then he asked, "What happened? I understand nothing." Alice smiled, but there was no warmth in her smile. "Don't you understand? Strange. I knew that the situation at the university wouldn't teach you anything, so I hedged my bets. Maybe too hard, but you deserve it, right? You are such a wonderful, loyal, loving man, and you managed to be like this not only with your wife, but also with your mistress. So, since you are so loving and generous, then let everyone who respected you know about it." Jack paled even more as he said, "What did you do?" Alice spoke calmly. "I hired a detective. He was following you, and he took all these pictures. I did this so that the pictures turned out to be at the university and at the dean, but that's not all. All your students now have these photos, and I also sent them to your mistress's parents. And I have no doubt that they will not leave you alone. Her dad will be very angry, and I'm sure of it. I congratulate you, my husband. You're a star now. And yes, one more thing. I filed for divorce." Jack dropped to his knees in front of Alice. He was still thinking only about losing his wife. "I'm sorry. I don't know what came over me. I love you so much. This girl is to blame for everything." Alice furrowed her brows. "What are you talking about? Are you out of your mind? I hate talking to you. I'm leaving." Alice got up and went out into the corridor. She dragged the suitcases into the entrance and then slammed the door with all her might. And Jack remained sitting on the floor. He was staring at one point, and his phone was not subsiding from calls and messages. The bell rang again, and Jack took out his phone and looked at the screen. Emerald was calling. He picked up the phone. "Jack, my parents know all about you. This has turned into such a scandal for me. I had to admit that you are married and cannot marry me, and my father is very angry. I told him your address. I'm sorry. He's coming to you." Jack didn't say anything. He disconnected the phone and threw it against the wall with all his might. The mobile phone went silent forever, and Jack grabbed his head and ruffled his hair. He lost everything: his beloved wife, job, authority, reputation. What else was waiting for him ahead? He was afraid to imagine.
Her life was sad since childhood. She was born into a large family, fifth child. Her father was a heavy drinker. Her mother was always busy with her affairs or other children. She was very lonely. She felt no one needed her. The grief happened when Mary was 6 years old. Her father died. The times began terribly. They didn't have enough money all the time, but they had good people who brought food and clothes. Her mother fell into depression when Mary's father died. Mom's tantrums happened quite often, as well as nervous breakdowns. Her mother took her anger out on the children. She yelled at them constantly, sometimes even beat them. Her mother didn't love Mary and got hurt a lot, but she was the smallest and couldn't defend herself. She was punished for every wrongdoing. Mary was troubled with her mother for the bruises and for calling her names, insulting and humiliating her. Mary would sometimes close herself to her mother in the toilet and scratch the wall with a pen about her unbearable life. Mary's childhood was just like that. Mary moved to the 7th grade and met a girl named Bella as her class was new. Bella was a pariah. No one was friends with her, and all her classmates shunned her. But Mary decided to go against everyone. The class hated both girls. The break at school was a nightmare. Mary and Bella were throwing dirty rags at coated clothes with chalk. Bullying of girls became permanent at school, and Mary switched to homeschooling. She graduated with difficulty. Mary got her first job at 17. She was washing dishes in the dining room. She became a kitchen worker 6 months later, and then she got a job as a cook. Mary had been working for 2 years in the cafeteria, where the men who liked her often went. She met Adam there. Mary fell in love quickly, and they moved in together. Adam often went away on business trips, and Mary was very painfully separated. Adam went away on another business trip, and Mary couldn't get through to Adam all day, and the next morning a woman answered her phone and told her that Adam was asleep. Mary hung up on her, at which point the whole world collapsed. Her tears rolled down her cheeks. She didn't understand why Adam did this to her because she loved him so much. They were married together. After a while, Mary forgot about Adam. She often walked along the waterfront alone and thought of life. Adam was waiting for her in a dark alley with a knife one night. He grabbed Mary from behind, hit the building hard, pulled out a knife, and stabbed her in the ribs. Mary was shaking with fear and horror. She could not yet understand that Adam was standing behind her. He turned her around after 2 minutes, and she was stunned. Adam was high. His eyes were angry, full of rage. He grabbed Mary's hand, but did not remove the knife. He dragged her down to the road. His car was there and ordered me to go with him. Adam brought her to the apartment. Then they spent the night together, and by the morning, Adam had fallen asleep, and Mary had managed to escape. Mary avoided Adam and did not return his calls. She met another man in the dining room at the time, Jack. Jack came from out of town for work. They started seeing each other a lot. Jack would walk Mary home every night, and one night Adam was waiting for them outside the house. The men began to fight, and Mary ran home. Jack won the fight, and Adam left Mary alone. Jack asked Mary to marry them after 6 months, and she agreed. Their wedding was modest, with only relatives. Mary got pregnant 3 months later. Her pregnancy was difficult. She often lay in the hospital. Her child was born on time, but frail. He was often ill and developmentally challenging. The child became very sick when he was 1.5 years old. The doctors didn't think much of his illness. They said it was just a cough, prescribed him pills, and sent them home. The baby began to feel very bad. Mary called an ambulance 4 days later. The baby had a high fever. Unfortunately, the child died in the hospital 3 days later. It was pneumonia, which his weak body could not cope with. Mary had not spoken to anyone for 3 weeks. She prayed every day and cried, and Mary did not understand why her life punished her. Then Mary decided to divorce her husband 2 months later. She had no feelings for him. He came home one day not sober, and Mary decided to talk to him about the divorce. He beat her very badly that evening. Jack was kicking and punching her. Mary was drowning in tears, begging Jack to stop hitting her. His punch was powerful. Jack kneed Mary on the head. Mary passed out. Jack became sober the following day. He realized what he had done. Mary filed a police report on Jack at the time. Jack was called to the police, and after talking to the police, he returned home. Jack kneeling and begging Mary to withdraw the statement from the police. Mary was very angry with Jack, but agreed to start the application if they divorced quickly. Jack agreed. The property was sold, and the money was divided equally. Mary was trying to forget what had happened to her over the past few years. She called her friend Gwen, who had been friends for a long time, and Mary called her to meet her. Gwen was popular with men, so she had many friends. She brought Mary to her friends. There were many handsome, charming men, but Mary only noticed one. Michael turned out to be. He was tall, slim, and hilarious. He grew up in a good family. His father was a prosecutor. Michael went to police school, but never graduated from police school. He tried to work as a lawyer, but failed. He did not work permanently. They quickly hit it off. Michael went to work for a month. They called each other every day and got much closer. They started dating a month later. Michael was very romantic, sometimes gentle. He asked Mary to live together. She moved into his house. Everything changed at one point when his father died. Michael suddenly became very angry and cruel. His father gave him money and protected him from crime before, and everything changed at one point. Mary and Michael ran out of cash. Michael was left in debt, and Mary was threatened. Mary worked as a small store salesman then, and had barely enough money to buy groceries and pay utility bills. Michael owed a lot of money, so they had to move to another town because they threatened his whole family. They moved to the big city, rented an apartment, and started a new life. Mary was trying to find a job, and Michael was pretending to look for a job. He wasn't going to work. Money started running out. Michael's mom sent them more money, but she said it was the last time. Soon, that money was running out. The rent had to be paid. Mary sold her computer out of despair. The money came from the sale. It was enough for a month. Mary was sitting by the window and didn't know what to do. There was no money left, no job, no rent. A fight arose amidst these problems between Michael and Mary ran into the bedroom and closed the door, and Michael was furious, and he broke down the bathroom door. He realized what he had done, told her to pack her things, and said they were leaving the next day. Michael called his friend, and he came to pick them up. Michael's friend took them to Michael's grandmother's. Mary got a job after 1 month, and she got a job at a small bakery. She worked every day because there was no money. Michael lay on the couch all day, and when his grandmother kicked him out of the house, he didn't come back sober and angry. Michael said a week later that he had found a job. The job was at the construction site. He left every day in the morning and returned in the evening. He promised that the money would be paid, but later, Michael didn't bring the money, even after 2 weeks. Mary had saved up money for that time to get a room. Michael took the money gladly and started looking for a place to live. They didn't move in. They kept living with Grandma. Mary started talking to Michael about renting. He seemed nervous, and she realized he was lying. He stole his grandmother's money, and it turns out he was drinking and living for a while. And then he started gambling and needed more money. Mary gave him the money to rent a place, and he lost it. Mary was desperate. She got involved with an alcoholic, gambler, and thief in the same person. Michael was proud and was not ashamed to tell everyone that his dad was a prosecutor. Everything was revealed, and then there was a terrible scandal. Michael grabbed Mary by the hair and began to beat her in front of his grandmother. Mary had endured everything. She had nowhere to go. Mary was almost broke, and home was a long way away. Grandma left after 1 month and left their things on the landing. They spent 3 days on their belongings at the entrance. Michael called his mother, who sent a car to pick them up. They came home. Mary got a job back at the store, and Michael took his time with work. He had spent his father's money before and didn't want to do anything. Michael started drinking a lot of alcohol from idleness. Life was unbearable for Mary. He caused her scandals at work and insulted and humiliated her. Mary called the police often. Michael avoided responsibility because he had many friends among the police. Mary tried to break up with Michael. He stalked her, threatened her, and beat her on the street. She was afraid to leave work sometimes to go home. Michael's mom told her she was sick of it. She blamed Mary for choosing Michael. Michael stopped drinking a month later, started acting normal, and they started dating again. Michael got a good job as a driver 4 months later. The business trip dragged on, he didn't pick up his phone all day, and the next morning a girl answered his phone and said that Michael didn't want to talk to Mary. The world collapsed for the second time. Mary didn't believe it was happening to her. The story repeated itself as with Adam. Mary was in utter despair. She didn't want to see anyone. She didn't talk to anyone. Mary shut down and became depressed. She couldn't survive the betrayal again because she forgave Michael so much, tolerated his abuse, and he did that to her. Mary saw only one way out. Mary met a lovely man named Tom on Tinder. He lived in a different city and invited Mary to come and meet him. Mary decided a month later. She took some things and visited Tom. The acquaintance was excellent. They spent a wonderful 3 weeks together, but had to return home. Tom only let Mary go on the condition that she return in 1 month and move in with him forever. Mary settled all her problems in 1 month, packed her things, and moved in with Tom. She wanted to leave all her memories of resentment at home and never think about them. After all, she was finally going to have a good life. Mary had moved in with Tom. A year had passed since then. Mary felt beautiful. No one had ever hurt her in that house. The nerves returned to normal. Mary became much calmer. The man was with Mary, who cared for her, not bullied her. Tom was a hard-working and responsible man. He never humiliated or betrayed Mary, so she loved and valued him so much. They often went for a walk in the woods. Mary remembered walking alone, and now her walks were always with Tom. He supported her always, even in the most foolish endeavors. Mary turned 30 today and became happy. She managed to forgive all those who hurt her. She was able to forget almost all the terrible things she did. She became much kinder to everyone and learned to trust people again. Life began with a new line. Now all the bad things are behind us.
It was the 17th of July, just past 7 p.m. Andy was devastated. His mother, Pauline, had just broken the unfortunate news that his father had left her for someone else sexier. This meant that she no longer had a husband, and that more importantly to poor Andy, he no longer had a father. Throughout the rest of July, he struggled with depression and came extremely close to giving up. The realization that he had lost the father figure that had always been exceptionally important to him was finally kicking in. All those fond memories of their time together suddenly flooded him. That one time they were fishing, Andy fell in the lake because the fish overpowered him. Thrashing at football, and all those times his father came home drunk and became violent. In Andy's mind, these drunken fits of rage were always brushed off as occasional outbursts because of a stress-filled life. Due to his autism, Andy was vastly intelligent, and while he rightly took his autism in stride and correctly viewed it as a strength rather than a weakness, it had always led to two significant problems. The first was not being able to pick up on certain things, which is why he never realized until now that his father was a violent and selfish man. Secondly, he suffered from social anxiety, and difficulty with making friends plagued him. He admired many people and shared similar interests, but ultimately struggled to connect with them because of how shy and overwhelmed he could suddenly get. As a result of this, he was hit even harder by his father's actions, as he had no friends to rely on and be comforted by. Andy's mother, Pauline, was aware of this, and despite her being upset, she bought Andy an invaluable gift to try and comfort him in any way possible: a laptop. Her reasoning was not only to ensure that Andy had something to occupy his time and prevent boredom, but it was also a new way for him to find friends and socialize online. She hoped communicating online would help him feel less shy when approaching people, and it seemed to initially take away the immense pain he was experiencing, which was great. He quickly created an Instagram, Facebook, and Discord page to meet new people. All was seemingly swimmingly, but people began to laugh at him and send hateful messages because of who he was. Andy had never owned a laptop before, so he didn't know what he was doing. This led to situations like him messaging his mother, but accidentally sending these messages into open posts and public forums, leading to humiliation. Things worsened when he told these people about his new idea for a fledgling startup project. "You'll never achieve anything, you absolute fucking cretin. Not in a trillion years. Might as well quit while you're ahead. It saves you wasting your time and us laughing when you fail." These horrible, offensive, spiteful insults were hurled at Andy, shaking him to his core. This deeply affected Andy so much. As a result, he ended up spending August in isolation. However, this could benefit him as it provided vital time to work on something. Fueled by the anguish that he still felt because of his father, he worked hard on creating a program to simulate human behavior. Why did he do this? He wanted to ensure that in the future, he wouldn't have to suffer from bullying or missing a cue, because using his program, getting to know people and reading their emotions and thoughts would be a lot easier. December 1st rolled around, and Andy was starting to communicate with more and more people. He took the newfound knowledge from previous experiences with people online, and now made sure to send his mom messages more privately. He tried to find interests in people similar to his, and created engaging and meaningful conversations out of them. He noted these topics of interest and other aspects of the individuals, and put them into his algorithm. Based on the results, he'd know whether they were compatible with him, which was reassuring. To the shock of Andy and Pauline, the program had grown rapidly in popularity over the past few months, and Andy became rich and famous as a result of this just within a few months. His dad caught wind of this and wanted to become a part of their lives again, but they weren't gullible or stupid. Far from it, in fact. Ironically, Pauline ran her husband through the algorithm, and even it determined that he was completely unreliable. Andy's father tried his best to worm his way back in, but Pauline and Andy were fed up with these desperate and pitiful cries, so they moved away to a new address so they would no longer need to be disturbed. The flights were booked, and Edinburgh, Scotland, was set firmly in their sights. The most exciting aspect of this was similar for Andy and his mother. Andy had a friend called Levi on Discord and lived in Berwick upon Tweed, which is quite close, whereas his mom had a handsome man named Rodriguez. While managing the algorithm for company, Andy, he just so happened to live in Edinburgh again. It was now mid-December and everything was great. Andy and his mom were living thanks to the immense success of the program comfortably. Although it was a cold December's Eve, Andy felt like shopping and exploring Edinburgh. which was still relatively unfamiliar to him. It was a frigid night, the city barren and ominous. As the snow began to fall and the trees glistened, he was starstruck. An excellent sight was gracing his eyes. Among the trees was a little gift shop with intriguing and aesthetically appealing lights illuminating its exterior. He was so intrigued by these lights that he strolled up to the shop and looked into the front window. It turned out to be a pawn shop. Andy had been looking for Christmas gifts, so he thought it'd be at least worth a punt to browse this shop. Knocking the door several times, he noticed a slight, frail silhouette slowly making its way to the door. "How can I help you, young man?" passionately spoke the elderly gentleman. Andy explained he was looking for a nice Christmas gift. The gentleman led him to the technology section and the assortment of phones. He had amassed quite a collection of brand new phones. "I'll take a few, kind sir." He smiled at the gentleman, as he knew what he would ask next. "How many is a few, young man?" Andy continued to smile, thinking of the happiness that this would bring. 173, please." A few days later, and it was the 26th of December, 2018. Christmas had come and gone. Pauline had met a new man called Dan while he was working as their business manager. He proposed to her on Christmas Day. While Andy was initially quite skeptical, he passed the reliability test, the only evidence needed to prove that Dan was perfect for Pauline. Being in such a positive mood, due to the thought of him and his mom finally being truly happy again, he started to wrap up the 173 iPhones. As bizarre as it sounds, this number wasn't random. Andy had noted every person that previously said kind things, stuck up for him, and was overall a good friend to him. Now that he was living comfortably, successfully, he wanted to spread a little Christmas cheer and give something back to the people who genuinely cared. Luckily, the iPhone boxes were only so small that he could fit all 173 into his mom's car boot, and they drove to the post office together. They were all sent off to be delivered to multiple addresses. To show this appreciation for his true friends, he wrote a heartwarming message on the back of each of the 173 parcels. It read, "To my best friend from the unknown, I hope this gift brings you some happiness. If so, I will be happy." He originally intended for the parcel to be anonymous. Giving back was all that mattered to him personally. Them knowing about it was irrelevant. Unfortunately, though, Andy forgot to tell the post office this while providing the iPhone cases. Ultimately, his name and address were unintentionally plastered on the back of the parcels. It was now New Year's Day. Andy, his mother, and his new stepfather, Terry. He had just booked his holiday from work. A client was asking for numbers and book for his business accounts to be sorted out, but it was New Year's Day, and all that mattered to him was family. They were chatting amongst themselves until a knock at the door. They lived in rural Scotland. They had to drive 30 miles to reach the nearest post office, so a knock at the door, it wasn't heard of. Terry got up, curious as to who it was on the other side of the door. It was a courier with a parcel. It was from one of the addresses Andy sent an iPhone. It turned out to be the same package, unopened. Somehow the note had managed to stay firmly attached. It said, "Andy, you left your address visible, you donut. Thanks for the sweet message, though I don't want an iPhone. Being your friend is all I need. Love, Davina. P.S. I live nearby. Meet me at the old Hitchington Lake on the 5th of January at noon." He boarded the bus around 1 p.m., chilled and ready to meet Davina. As the bus drove, he noticed small cottages, a barrage of wildlife, and a surprisingly dry Scottish day. He loved the atmosphere, mainly striking ambience that was somewhat comforting. The bus arrived at 1:30, which was good, as he wanted to practice his social skills and be prepared. Standing by the river, he noticed a partially broken swing. Usually he would stay clear of this, but he needed the confidence to speak to Davina, so he decided to live a little. It was fun at first, but then the rope dwindled, and within seconds it snapped, and he fell directly into the lake. When the fishing incident happened with his dad, he was okay, because he was with someone, but this time he was on his own, and swimming to safety wasn't an option because he didn't know how to. It all seemed over, and just as he started to flail and struggle, a faint voice was audible. Suddenly, a young girl of a similar age to Andy dived into the river and grabbed him. She guided him out of the water and saved him. He was shaken, but he was still alive. "You saved me." "Andy, I told you to meet me by the river, not in the river." As if it were destiny, Davina and Andy quickly grew to like each other. Love at first sight. Andy endured a challenging year, but he had gained a new family against all of the seemingly impossible odds. Not one new addition, but two.
Things were never smooth for Jack and his mom. Jack was an artist from birth, and he lost his father when he was just a kid. He grew up in the hands of his mom in a single-room apartment. They were their neighbors themselves, as no one in the neighborhood wanted to associate with them. Jack's mom, Ms. Jane, had gone from one menial work to another to put food on the table for herself and her poor son. She often combined 3 works in a day to provide for his autistic son, who she had earlier enrolled in one of the best schools in the city. Her neighbors often laughed and made fun of her for being poor and having expensive taste. They talked behind her back as they were awed why she had decided to send her son to the almighty St. Hallmark's amongst all other affordable schools where her caliber often sent their kids. After several unanswered questions from these busybodies, they challenged Miss Jane about why she had to risk all that for her kid. In her words, she replied to her critics by saying, "Even though I'm poor, I wouldn't want my son to grow up in the circle of the mediocre. Growing up and mixing with the kids of the rich will help my son build a sharp mindset toward money and have a better connection that will eventually help him in the future. I wouldn't mind working all around the clock to give my son the best." Some of these critics saw some sense in the reason behind her actions, while some called her dumb and criticized her further. Ms. Jane seemed unbothered as she still ran 3 to 4 jobs to achieve her dream for her son. She had 1 full-time job and 2 part-time. She was a full-time janitress. She always resumed work as early as 6 a.m. and close around 5 p.m., granting her the rest of the day to settle down for her other jobs. Who said it was easy? It was never easy. Sometimes she missed sleep as she had to prepare for the next day. She had to take care of her autistic son and prepare his meal before he left for school. Jack was a term in high school. His experience had been terrific as he wasn't getting any fun from school. He was bullied every day by his classmates. This must have been because of his health conditions and his mom's financial status. He came from a different world from the other students. They avoided him like the plague. He tried making friends with them, but they knocked him in the head or kicked him in the ass, yelling at him to stay away from them. He soon started isolating himself. As if that was enough for these bullies, they still went for him in his isolation. They would drag him and make jest of him for being physically impaired. They laughed at him because his mom was a janitor in a small company down the road, and she had to sponsor his education with the stipends she was earning. Their teacher witnessed their callous and uncultured acts towards the poor Jack, and she chastised them for it. She asked that they apologize to him and never try such again. Jack felt so bad about the ridicule his classmates and schoolmates generally made out of him. He was pained to the bone marrow. He wanted to change the narrative. He felt so pissed with himself and concluded he wouldn't let himself remain public trash where everyone dumps insults, and for his poor mom, he was going to do something. Jack decided to go out all to make life better for himself and his mom, and at least stop being a piece of mockery, and most significantly, stop his mom from working as a janitor. That was his utmost drive. He started working. He tried to sell his services. In the bid, he became a freelancer online since he had learned some skills on YouTube. The design had always got his attention, and he breathed it. Even in his subconsciousness, or whenever he was lost in his thought, he would draw on the ground with his index finger, trying to craft a new design. His classmates called him weird for that, so he took his time to learn it extensively. He became very good at it, and his talent had just met professionalism. He started selling his skill on freelance websites and making some cool cash. He was ecstatic the day he got his first project. He couldn't hold his joy as he jumped without bothering about his condition. Tears flowed down his cheeks like a baby. You would think he was just declared the next president of the U.S. The project was just a $10 work. It was small, but he didn't mind. It was not really about the money to him, but the fact that he could get hired and paid afterward swept him off his feet. When his mom returned, he quickly ran to her and hugged her. The mom was shocked to have seen her son happy again after the tough times he had been going through in his school. She couldn't help but wonder what had got Jack very pleased, but she sure knew there was a reason behind his strange happiness. In a keen voice, she asked him, "My baby, what is it?" Jack told his mom about the good news, and he promised to make sure she stopped working as a janitor. He executed the project diligently, and he was rewarded soon. He got another work after a week. This time it was $50. He was convinced this was the pace setter for him and his mom. He pleaded with his mom to quit her full-time job while he took care of them. However, he tried to calm him to take things slowly. She would stop eventually, but it wasn't time yet. He wasn't pleased with his mom's decision, but gave in after several persuasion from the mom. 6 months down the line, Jack had been able to amass thousands of dollars. He was able to do this with his beautiful creativity and hard work. He had sleepless nights and sometimes missed school to meet up with deliveries. He didn't touch his earnings. He saved them on this trusted website. But the unexpected happened. The website crashed and he lost all his hard-earned savings. Jack became depressed. This didn't seem too good for Jack. He grew lean within a few weeks as he wouldn't eat but cry all night. His mom consoled him, but he wasn't getting all of that. All he wanted was a miracle. He wanted his money. He had too many plans for the money. That was the money he had planned to establish his mom with. He felt so discouraged. Building and nurturing a new account from scratch wasn't a quick bone to break. The market got competitive by the day. He had no access to any of his top clients again, and he had no way to reach them as they only transacted on the website, as that was the policy. The platform promised to kick back and pay up every freelancer affected by the unfortunate technical problem. Jack waited about 2 months to get a response from them, but nothing seemed forthcoming, and every action to reach out to their customer support was futile. Jack accepted his fate and decided to channel his determination towards something else. This time, he started working for a logistics company. He helped people clean up their apartments and got paid stipends, and he did this for months, even though it wasn't advisable for his health. His mom warned him to stop because of his health status, but Jack was too determined to stop her mom from working as a janitor and raise cash again so he could establish her. Unfortunately, his mom became ill. She was diagnosed with complications because of stress and the humid, filthy places she was working. She was forced to stop working as a janitress, at least pending the time she recovered. They had to keep her on medications to aid her recovery. Drugs were expensive, and hospital admission was more expensive. Jack spent all the money he had saved on her mom's health so she could be okay again. He exhausted everything he had. He had to double his hustle to keep the mom fine and save her from dying. He decided to add delivery work to his cleaning job. This time, he had to combine academics with his two challenging jobs. He would rush to school every morning after having a short sleep. He would leave school before the usual time to resume his cleaning. He would joggle his schedule to meet up with clients' deliveries. Sometimes he delivered late and got several lashbacks from their clients. The company he was working for had sanctioned him twice and threatened that on the third strike he would be dismissed. In the run to save his mom, trying to see her mom get back on her feet, Jack faced some health problems, nervousness, and panic attacks. He was weak and vulnerable. The health problems were highly expected. An autistic guy like him shouldn't stress himself too much, but Jack couldn't help. He had responsibilities on his shoulder. His mom asked him to stop worrying about her and that she would be fine. The doctors restricted him from working. This is the end, he thought, as tears dropped in his eyes. The doctors supervised Jack for 1 week to ensure that he didn't sneak to work behind their backs. After a week, he got a bit better and returned to the company he was working for. Sadly, the company hired someone to take his place since he was absent for a week with no upfront notice. He tried explaining to them that he had been ill and was under strict orders not to leave the hospital, but they weren't patronizing him. After a lot of pleas, he had to leave there with shame. Tears had gathered around his eyes and blurred his sight as he walked like a helpless beggar. He also rammed into a car that was coming without even noticing. The man's honking at him brought him back to reality. The man cursed him and went his way. Jack couldn't even pick a fence because he was the one at fault. He walked down to the hospital where his mom was admitted. As he got to the hospital entrance, he slipped and slumped, hitting his arm hard on the floor. Immediately, he lost consciousness. The nurses ran towards him and rushed him into the emergency ward, a different ward from his mom's. After a few hours, he sneezed from his deep sleep and opened his eyes. The doctors calmed him down and assured him everything was okay. They handed him the handkerchief and his phone that had fallen off his back pocket after he slumped. He asked about his mom, and they told him she was sleeping, and she didn't even know about what had happened to him. He collected his phone. He noticed he had missed calls from his mom and a mail notification displaying on his phone lock screen, but ignored the mail. He unlocked his phone to call his mom and assure her he was fine. Having unlocked his phone, he could read the mail's headline. Surprisingly, it was from the freelance platform he was working with and had all his savings stuck in after they experienced a severe technical setback. The headline read, "Hi, dear Jack, we are back, and we are stronger." He was astonished. He quickly clicked the mail to read up on everything. Yes, it was that great news he had been waiting for. He quickly signed in, and it was accessible. He jumped up and screamed. His right arm was bandaged and healing, but it didn't matter. His scream got everyone's attention, including the doctors, and they all ran into his ward thinking something terrible had happened. He asked the doctors how much their bill was, and they told him. He assured them he would be back the following day. He dashed out, headed to his mom's ward, and wrapped his hands around her. He shared the good news with her, and she was elated too. Jack demanded a withdrawal of all his savings. The request was granted after he was able to verify that he owned the account. After 12 hours, his earnings were sent to his mom's history, which he had linked as his beneficiary. The following day, he cleared all their bills, and they were still left with a considerable amount to establish his mom, just like he had envisioned. The mom was admitted after a week. Jack resumed school and had access to his clients who had missed him. They started working together on new projects while Jack's mom quit her job as a janitor and started her own business. Jack's bullies stopped bullying him too. They were able to get a mini supermarket for his mom in a commercial area. Both the autist guy and his janitress mom lived a better and happier life ever after.